Hey everybody. So LG's 2024 models are officially announced and priced. There's some other details too that we can kind of dig through and get an estimation of what to expect from them. So I'm seeing release dates of March 11th and 17th. So somewhere within that 1 week range should be when they start to ship out. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to get one at that time period, but should be able to at least officially buy one, not just pre-order. They are up for pre-order as well, and you will find some links in the description of the video to order them if you are looking at ordering any of them at launch. So let me pull this up here so I could kind of break this down easily. And I wanted to compare the last few years of releases. We're going to be focusing on the G series, which is in green, and the C series in blue, and kind of go through what's changed year to year and what to expect this year. So if we go back to 2021 with the G1, it was available in 55, 65, and 77 inches. So there's only three sizes at that point. And the power draw is kind of an indicator of increase in performance year over year, but kind of not also. It just depends because the power draw could stay the same, but if they made it more efficient and increase the brightness, then it would stay the same. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if there's no increase in power draw, that there was no increase in brightness. But it also, if there is an increase in brightness from one year to the next, then you can expect a increase in brightness. So with the G1, full field HDR was about 170 nits. These are kind of just rough averages, but for the most part, that was about what you got on the different sizes. And then real scene highlights and HDR was around 800 nits. And then here were the original launch MSRP prices of 2200, 3000, and 4500. With the G2 in 2022, there was more sizes available with the 83 and the 97. But these first three, you can see comparatively to the G1, power consumption dropped. This was from the newer revised panel and then having the heat sink. So it was able to get brighter even though the power consumption did drop in 22. The 185 watts and 230 watts were for the 83 and 97-inch sizes. And then where I put like this slash in the lower number, this is going to be for the larger sizes because they didn't perform as well. The 97 was actually even a little bit lower than the 83, but the first number here was the 55 through 77 with 950 nits roughly peak on get there was some fluctuation there. Some were only 900, some were 1,000. Is somewhere in that middle range is where they peaked out. But with the 83 inch, it was closer to like low 800s. So I put 820, and then the 97s were actually a bit lower than that with upper like 770, 780 range, something like that. Then we move on to last year with the G3, which brings MLA to the 55, 65, and 77-inch sizes. So we do see increase in power draw, and then also the MLA being added additional brightness as well. MLA by itself is just like an add-on to the panel, wouldn't really increase power consumption. So this is just them pushing that panel a bit harder. So we can see, fairly smallish increases here in power draw, and then the MLA made up the difference. But we can see with the 83 and the 97, they stayed the same. The 83 and 97 inch G3 performs exactly like the G2. So we can see now, though, with the smaller sizes, it was up to 230 nits, roughly full field in HDR. And again, the 83 is the same. And then 1400 roughly for peak highlights in HDR. If we look at the pricing that's happened up to this point, G1 to G2 was, same price at 55, a little bit more at 65, and a little bit less at 77. And then you have the first prices for the 83 and the 97. With the G3, pretty much just all steady increase in price overall. That was kind of expected because the G3 was a really big bump with the MLA, whereas the 83 and the 97 was the same TV, essentially, no difference, and same launch price. that technically could have been lower. Now in 2024, we're seeing for the 55-inch increased power draw quite a bit more than last year, and then same with 65 and 77, and now with 83, which also has MLA this year. There's also a big power draw increase because you got to remember the 83 G2 and G3 were only hitting 820-ish nits roughly. So quite a difference from where like the G2 was at the smaller sizes. So it had to catch up to the G3 at least this year. And based on everything that they're marketing and looking at like the spec sheets, the 83 is now combined in with the 55 through 77 for everything they're saying as far as the expected brightness increases. So we can expect the 83-inch G4 to perform at the minimum as well as a 77 G3, but probably should also expect it to be performing like the other G4s now. So somewhere in that range would be good enough. But it will be surprising if the 83 does match the 77 and lower. But it will be a nice surprise if it does. So we can expect roughly at the full field. There hasn't been much talk about any increase in brightness. So I'd expect the same as the G3, maybe a little bit brighter, but not a whole lot. And then with real highlights and HDR, we're going to expect anywhere from 1750 to 2000. So their marketing claim is 150% over the B4, which the B4 is going to perform pretty similarly to like a C3 or C2, or the B3, B2. So like somewhere in that range. So those are anywhere from 7 to 800 nits, depending on which one you're looking at, and if you're trying to factor in any increase this year for the B4. So if you multiply that by 2.5, which realistically should be 250%, their marketing team kind of messed up that number. Just like last year with the A95L from Sony, they said 200% brighter, and some people thought that that meant 4 times as bright or something, or 3 times as bright. But 200% increase would be a double. So if you do the math at 2.5x what the B4 would be expected, that puts you somewhere in the 1750 to 2000 nit range. And all of these numbers are at D65. Real Scene Highlight HDR is like the test that I use. That's roughly with LG, a 10% window is roughly equivalent to the Real Scene HDR highlights, but you also do get a little bit extra on some of them. So we're just kind of ballparking here, but I would expect probably in the 1850, maybe 1900 range, conservatively for the G4. But kind of just left it open there a little bit because last year the G3 didn't quite reach the 1500 that was expected, and the G2 didn't really quite reach the 1000 that was expected. So if we get 1750, that won't be surprising. All right, gonna move on to the C series now. And in 21, there was the 48-inch, and then 55, 65, 77, and 83. So most of these sizes, the 55 through 77, is this first number, roughly 130 nits full field and 750 for highlights. And then the smaller size, the 48, was around 115 to 120. I saw usually like 116, 118 for full field. And then, 700 would really be on the high end. Is usually upper 600s for the smaller one. And the 83 didn't perform as well as the 55 to 77 either. But, you know, uh, that's kind of just where the C1 was. So the C2 actually did bring a nice improvement over the C1, and it also added the 42-inch size. So these are a little bit staggered now because the 42 is here. So the 42-inch was 70 watts. The 48-inch had dropped from 90 to 80. This is where it switched the panel type. So you got a more efficient panel, and that's why power consumption went down, even though brightness went up. So you can kind of just see that across the board. The 55 was now 95 watts instead of 106, and then 65 was 115 instead of 130, and then 77 was 150 instead of 170, and 83 was 170 instead of 180. And it did bring a nice bump in APL brightness. So you got 160 nits full field on the majority of the sizes, just not the small ones. The small ones, again, were in the like 115, maybe 120 for full field, and 700 peaks on the smaller sizes, around 700 on the 83 as well still. But the 55 through 77 on the C series was now hitting 800. And if we look over at the pricing, you can see the again, it's staggered because the 1400 is for the 42 inch. So we didn't see a price increase, really, any size. We only saw a price decrease at the 77 and 83. And I think I forgot to go over the pricing of the G4. So let me back up a second here. So we can see the G4 prices are basically matched to the G3, except slightly higher in the 65 and 75 or 77-inch sizes. So those ones went up $100. 83 is still 6,500. However, now there actually is a parity here with the 83-inch size compared to the smaller sizes. The 97 still does not have MLA. However, the 97 did bring a large increase in power consumption, so we can expect possibly a new panel or a refined change in the panel, as well as an increase in brightness on the 97, because that's a big 100-watt difference right there. So if the 97 G2 and G3 were getting upper 700s, maybe the G4 97 might be reaching 1,000 nits now, roughly. So we'll have to see on that one. But anyway, back down to the C series last year with the C3. So we didn't really see much change at all from the C2 to the C3. It was basically the same TV, just software changes. Same brightness pretty much across the board. The 42-inch on paper dropped a little bit in efficiency because of the change in panel, although in the United States, the 42-inch was always the newer panel anyway. It was just elsewhere. So I think that might just be a mix-up anyway. So yeah, C2 and C3 basically clones aside from software. And then they did lower the price a little bit on the smaller ones and on the 83. Otherwise, pricing stayed the same. This year with the C4, we can now see we are getting power draw increases. So we can expect a brightness increase from that. There's no, MLA. There's no, other change that would really affect power draw other than they're just pushing the panel harder. So we can see here, relatively decent increases in power. So, we can estimate that full field should now be somewhere in the 180 to 200 from the 55 and up, whereas the 42 and 48, really no idea what to expect. Hopefully they're going to be hitting at least like 150 full field. Realistically, though, I'd probably say even 130, 135 range would net, some kind of notable improvement. And then for peak highlights, we should be seeing anywhere from 850 to 1,000 on the 55 and up. With the 42 and 48, again, no real way to know on those ones. Maybe 800 nits or something. So if we look at the prices, though, prices have gone up this year. So we got basically a $200 increase across the board, except 83 is only going up 100. So it's kind of disappointing to see the price going up a couple $100 for each size on the C series, when this is just pushing the same hardware a little bit harder with software. But there's an updated Alpha 9 processor, not really a new processor. The G4 does bring the new Alpha 11 processor. So if there was more of a price increase on the G series, that would make more sense than there is with the C series. So I'd say the C series pricing is kind of disappointing to see, especially when the C3 was behind the competition in 23. So we'll have to see if they did enough with it this year to make the C4 worthwhile. And surely these deals or prices are going to drop with deals in the near future, but I would say they kind of need sale prices basically out of the gate if they want to get them moving at the start. Whereas the G series, G4, kind of priced as expected. I would have liked to seen parity price with the G3 across all the ranges, but an extra $100 on the 65 and 77 isn't that bad. So, all right, well, that's kind of it at this point. Mid-March, we will have more information, review, settings, and all that kind of stuff. So look out for that. And I guess I will see you all then. Thank you all for watching. Hope this helps you out. And let me know what you think below in the comments. Have a good day, everybody.